The year is 1990. Florida retiree Jack Gargan is mad as hell and he is not gonna take it anymore. So he pulls nearly $50,000 out of his retirement fund and buys a run of full-page newspaper ads that say, quote, "I'm mad as hell and I am not gonna take it anymore." The thing he's mad about, and the thing he's been mad about for many years, is the role money plays in American politics. In 1974, he ran for Tampa City Council and was appalled by how much money his opponents were spending while campaigning for a somewhat minor office. One spent $8,000, another spent $20,000. Gargan claimed to have spent less than $5 out of principle. Way less, actually. His campaign budget was later revealed to be 40 cents. This meant that instead of paying the $400 filing fee to get his name on the ballot like the others did, he had to do so via petition. And since he couldn't hire anyone to collect the 3,000 necessary signatures, he had to do it himself, spending day after day baking in a suit and tie under the Tampa sun. Gargan finished a distant 5th place in the race, but still attracted more than 1,600 votes after a campaign in which he spent exactly 40 cents. That crunches out to about 4,000 votes per dollar spent. Joe Biden raised $950 million for his 2020 presidential campaign, a number Gargan, who passed away in 2018, would have found revolting. Even after adjusting for inflation, if Biden had run his campaign with Gargan's efficiency, that would have bought him 728 billion votes, meaning every single American of voting age would have voted for him nearly 3,000 times. These obscene levels of spending shut out all but the major players and make politicians more accountable to their financiers than their voters. This, among a litany of other things, is what has Gargan so appalled, bitter, outraged, angry, incensed, livid, even more livid, enraged, disgusted, fed up, shocked, really hacked off. Ooh, that's good. I want to borrow that one. Tired, insulted, and sad. His call to action, as well as the name of his organization, is simply throw the hypocritical rascals out. He's asking you and me to clip, fill out, and mail in this pledge to go to the polls and vote against literally every single incumbent candidate at the municipal, state, and federal level. Doesn't matter who they are, which party they belong to, or which policies they represent. They've all got to go if we're ever going to get big money out of politics, eliminate deficit spending, and give the government back to the people. This is an interpretation of a commonly used political spectrum chart, the idea being that you generalize a given person's political positions and plot them according to how far to the left or right they are, economically as well as socially. It has its limits, and as you'll see, a cast of characters awaits us that's so bizarre as to defy simple categorization, but it's a board we can throw some darts at. Gargan seems to lean a little bit conservative fiscally while remaining agnostic on social issues completely. He is the rarest of things in the American political landscape, a true believer, a man of real conviction and ambition. His concern that this pledge will be shared and photocopied to the point of illegibility tells us his intentions of upending the apple cart are very real. In cribbing Howard Beale's iconic line from the film Network,
"Stick your head out of the window, open it, and stick your head out and keep yelling and yell, I'm as mad as hell, I'm not gonna take this anymore."
he's clearly hoping for the same reaction Beale is receiving here, but what makes this scene so powerful and resonant isn't that we think this is possible, it's that we know it's not. We're a nation of strangers. We're too atomized, alienated, checked out to collectively throw our windows open and scream Howard Beale's line into the rainy night. This is not happening. Except, in 1990, to a measured degree, it kind of is. More than 100,000 people fill out this pledge and mail it in. He raises north of $1 million. But even in this moment, it's not possible for Jack Gargan to comprehend the enormity of what he has just begun to build. This movement will soon blossom into one of the most shocking, unforeseeable, and outright weird episodes in all of American political history. A story written by millions of Americans who demand reform. Many of us in America enter every election season without being offered a viable political party with a realistic chance of winning major office that sufficiently reflects our ideas and priorities, leaving us to either settle for the party we can live with or check out of the political process altogether. This is the story of the people who decided to establish an alternative, and what came of it when they did. They advocated for a set of political positions that might or might not resemble yours or mine, but they were also after something greater, something thought to be impossible. A total and permanent dismantling of the two-party system. It's 1991, a year in, business is booming at Throw the Hypocritical Rascals Out, typically referred to by its acronym, THRA? An acronym that's this close to spelling out its own first word. It's a shame Gargan couldn't have called it Throw the Hypocritical Rascals Out of Washington or something. In more ways than one, he desperately needs a W. Gargan intends to throw a Hail Mary. He's looking to recruit a candidate he can load up with all his hopes and dreams and make a run at the White House. Gargan's not a young man, and although he wants to throw all the bums out at the city, county, state, and federal levels, he doesn't have the eons of time it would take to personally see it through. Instead, he has his sights set on bum number one, the Death Star. George H.W. Bush is the latest offering from a Bush family of politicians and business magnates. Former director of the CIA, vice president for 8 years, president for 4 years, the very definition of the establishment. Now the incumbent president is seeking a second term and appears so unbeatable that many of the most viable Democratic candidates have decided to sit this election out. But to Gargan, there is no better candidate to run against than Bush, a guy who so perfectly represents the powers he's trying to break apart. And to him, there would be no better challenger to get behind than Henry Ross Perot. Ross Perot is a man so disciplined and straight-laced that he probably never needs a haircut. His hair just knows to stop growing once it reaches crew cut length. But he harbors the very same qualities as the Reform Party he will eventually found. Ostensibly right down the center, straight as an arrow. And despite that, or more likely because of that, incredibly weird. This weirdness is the quality our Z-axis desperately flails toward. Sorely lacking a better term, I'm going to call this the fascination index. It doesn't necessarily confer positive or negative qualities, nor does it necessarily mean one is a good or bad person. It correlates instead with an individual's uniqueness, eccentricity, tendency to fascinate. In other words, do they have the pull? Do they have the juice? This is entirely subjective and unscientific, but I think anyone familiar with Ross Perot would agree he's got it by the truckload. After his years in the Naval Academy, the pride of Texarkana, Texas, got a sales job at IBM where he became perhaps the greatest salesperson in the history of the company, once knocking out his entire annual sales quota by mid-January. Perot eventually outgrew IBM, formed a competitor in EDS, and became the third wealthiest person in America. This was not enough to keep Perot busy. He once helped orchestrate a riot in Tehran as part of a sophisticated plot to free a couple of his employees from an Iranian prison. He affiliated himself with the likes of Henry Kissinger, Alexander Haig, and Oliver North, who told him to do all kinds of weird stuff with large sums of money, all of which I'm sure was totally above board. Perot did apparently have a line in the sand, though. When North asked him to help fund the Contras, Perot told him to get lost. This is the duality of Ross Perot. He tends to be uncompromisingly, fearlessly, straight up honest about what he believes, regardless of how unpopular it might be. For instance, when he was invited to lead a task force exploring ways to improve public education in Texas, Perot floated the solution of dramatically slashing funding for high school football. Again, in Texas. On the other hand, he periodically trots out a little collection of anecdotes that range from somewhat dubious to obvious lies. Like the one in which he claims that the North Vietnamese hired 5 Black Panthers to assassinate him, but were chased away by his dog. Ross Perot is attention-getting, outspoken, independent, rich enough to not have to rely on outside money, and having never actually run for office before, unsullied by the political machine. Perot is, in other words, Jack Gargan's image of the ideal holder of public office, even the top public office. In May of '91, Gargan scores a meeting with Perot and asks him to speak at a Thraw rally in November. Perot says yes. Gargan also asked Perot to consider an independent run for president of the United States. Perot says no. The 2,000 people who packed the room to see Perot urge him to run. He still says no, but he echoes Gargan's call to throw the bums out. In the coming months, Gargan continues to insist, and Perot continues to refuse. By the time Perot goes on Larry King Live in February of '92, he has said no to 1,000 people, but Larry, who has long been enamored with this charismatic little fella, is delighted to be person number 1,001.
Is there any scenario in which you would run for president? Can you give me a scenario in which you'd say, okay, I'm in?
And Perot says what he's always said.
I don't want to.
But then, for the first time, he delivers an answer that isn't a flat no.
If you're that serious, you, the people, are that serious, you register me in 50 states. And if you're not willing to organize and do that, then this is all just talk.
In waiting for his supporters to secure ballot access in all 50 states, he is setting the bar really high here. Probably too high, or so he hopes. You see, Ross Perot is clearly a guy who loves the spotlight. Attention fuels him. Even so, you gotta be at least a little bit of a sad individual to even seriously want to be president of the United States. And to actually mount a presidential campaign, you gotta be a real sicko. And to run as an independent candidate, that's just signing up for inevitable ridicule and disgrace. So far in the 20th century, that's been the story for independent and third-party seekers of the presidential office. In 1912, Teddy Roosevelt of the Bull Moose Party drew a larger popular vote than the Republican candidate, but of course, he benefited from actually having been president before. Robert M. La Follette recaptured some of Roosevelt's momentum to make a decent showing in 1924. In 1968, George Wallace picked up 13% with his racist pro-segregation campaign. Since then, GOP defector John Anderson has been the only non-Republican or Democratic candidate who's ever taken even the least bit seriously. And unlike them, Ross Perot has never held public office or even campaigned for one. He's in his 60s. He's a billionaire. He has the clout to go on TV and express his views whenever he wants. Why debase himself for the sake of a race that, in 1992, seems more unwinnable than ever? In March, Perot continues to play the role of reluctant hero, admitting that he hopes the Perot for President movement loses momentum so he can just get on with his life. He refuses to even take credit for said momentum, saying that people aren't even drawn to him specifically, but rather the possibility of the third option that he represents. Now, some say that he's being coy here, that he really has intended to run all along and just enjoys feeling selfless and deferential along the way. But I buy this from Ross. I really don't think he wants to do this. Well, bad news, buddy. An April 1st Gallup poll asked registered voters who they're with if this is indeed a three-way race. 44% say Bush, 25% say likely Dem nominee Bill Clinton, 24% Perot. He is statistically in a dead heat for second, and he has not even officially declared himself a candidate yet. People love to hear this guy talk, and not just those in his base, but Dem and GOP voters who are getting antsy and might be pried loose. He offers us a prime example on Face the Nation late in April. His crusade, of course, is to balance the federal budget, an incredibly boring and unglamorous issue, but listen to how he sells it.
Number one, we cannot spend our children's money. We are looking on the edge of a revolution of young people who are starting to realize that we, our generation, have put them $4 trillion in debt, and they don't like it, and they shouldn't. Don't we love our children as much as our parents loved us?
If I'm a registered voter who's watching this, suddenly, maybe I now care. Maybe he's got my attention. And unlike his opponents, he doesn't have an army of writers and PR people behind him to help him message things like this. In fact, he doesn't have any at all. This is just him. He also really knows how to work a crowd. In May, he addresses a gathering in Texas where he just quadrupled the required number of signatures needed to get on the ballot.
They said 53,000 signatures? Just regular folks can't do that.
That was the windup. Here's the pitch.
Well, you know, in all fairness to them, you did over 200,000.
Giving all the credit to his supporters dovetails perfectly with his image of the reluctant public servant, the hero who's called to lead by the people, the guy who is not in it for himself. It's this approach that's helped him slowly climb in the polls. Before this speech, he stood at 30%, 5 points behind Bush. After this speech, he moves into a tie for the lead. An independent candidate, a guy who has never run for office before, who has still not yet decided whether he's running right now, and who is doing a startling amount of this all by himself, is running neck and neck with the sitting president. In early June, he takes the lead outright. And then, in a poll published June 10th, he rockets to 38%. That is 8 points higher than Bush, 12 higher than Clinton. Anyone who has ever followed any race ever knows not to read too much into this. Things normalize. Around 4 months before Election Day, numerous polls suggest the three are about even. All the while, Perot is hammering together his platform while he's running on it. The longer he unofficially runs, the more it's beginning to dawn on him that he has to take positions on things that are not balancing the budget or campaign finance reform. When the candidates are asked for their positions on earmarking aid for inner cities, Perot answers, I don't know. Hold on. I am in the process of having an opinion about this. One issue Perot is clear on is abortion. He is unambiguously pro-choice, which seems to have the Bush camp terrified. They know their pro-life stance is unpopular, even with many in their own ranks, and since Perot is much more fiscally aligned with the GOP than the Democrats, they're scared that pro-choice Republicans are going to jump ship. This Bush-Perot battle, in fact, is drawing so much attention that Clinton is finding himself reduced to an irrelevant non-entity, just another Mondale-ish, Dukakis-y Democrat who's just kinda there. Meanwhile, Ross Perot's star could not be higher. People are wondering whether he'll officially declare his candidacy on his birthday, June 27th. That comes and goes. People now wonder whether he'll set his marker on Independence Day. No dice. A poll published on July 9th indicates he retains a slight edge. And then July 10th happens. Two stories drop on the same day. In the first, some Perot staffers allege that the campaign maintains a hostile colors list to track and monitor those working in the campaign who are suspected to be disloyal and potentially traitorous. It's an early and illuminating indicator of his obsession with micromanagement and tendency to give in to paranoia. And second, Perot speaks at an NAACP convention in Nashville. It took some convincing from his staff, as he initially didn't even want to bother because he felt like he didn't need their support, which, of course, leads you to wonder exactly who he has and has not been speaking to all this time. During his speech, he refers to the Black convention attendees as, quote, "you people." It's reported that some in the audience do audibly object to that, but Perot seems to not have heard him, and he calls them "you people" several more times. No, Ross. That's pretty bad. A couple of NAACP officials say that they don't believe he meant anything by it, but that it does show an embarrassing lack of effort on Perot's part to reach out to Black Americans. The blowback rattles Perot big time. In fact, it's quite possible that this is the first time the 62-year-old Perot has known what it is to screw up, to fail on a substantial scale. He's never known anything but unimaginable success, fast-tracking from IBM salesman to third richest American, from naval officer to appendage of the deep state and super special secret agent guy, from independent 5'5" gimmick candidate to presidential frontrunner. All throughout, he has exclusively received the feedback that by virtue of his charisma, intellect, and doggedness, he can never fail. He can never get it wrong or get it any less than exactly right. But it has finally happened to him. Game over. It's not quite accurate to say Ross Perot quit because he'd never actually officially entered in the first place, but he's gone from frontrunner to common citizen in the space of about 1 week, in so doing, crushing the hopes and dreams of everybody who believed in him. Why? There is a 5-layer Mastroika doll of reasons. First, the terror of reckoning with the fact that America is not a simple place. Second, he knew that at some point soon he was gonna have to tell the American people he planned on hiking their taxes, which would have put a decisive end to his honeymoon. The third set of reasons is that he believes that Clinton has successfully maneuvered around him, mobilized the pro-choice vote, and cut him off at the pass, denying him a path to victory. He was worried that a 3-way delegate split would force the House of Representatives to decide the election. He said he'd lost the drive to be president, or maybe he never even had it to begin with. The fourth set of reasons is detailed by the Washington Post days later. He couldn't stand politics and couldn't bear the realities of running a modern campaign. He hired the best of the best advisors, but he hated every single thing they said. He thought mailing out flyers was stupid because he hated junk mail. He thought airing campaign ads was stupid because he could just go on talk shows for free. He wanted nothing to do with anything that was not plainly straightforward and simple. It all fed into an environment of fundamental disorganization. For example, the campaign made plans to recruit former Attorney General William French Smith as his running mate, until somebody finally noticed that Smith had been dead for nearly 2 years. The fifth, final, and most spectacular set of reasons is not revealed until October, and they seem to be the ones that decisively took him out of contention. Get ready for this. Perot claims he left the race after receiving word that the Bush campaign was planning to blackmail his daughter. The story goes they were going to digitally fabricate and distribute an image of her that implied she was a lesbian near her wedding day, and were also planning on disrupting her wedding with protests. Perot also claims that Bush's people had bugged his phone and were plotting with the CIA, which Bush was once in charge of, to hack into a stock trading system and prevent him from accessing funds. Bush's campaign, it should be said, categorically denies all of this. And in fact, eyeballing subsequent polls could lead one to the conclusion that the Bush campaign should have wanted Perot to remain in the race, because as soon as Perot leaves, Clinton immediately begins crushing him in the polls. In the space of a couple weeks, he's vaulted from the high 20s to the high 50s. It certainly looks as though the lion's share of Perot's voter base has migrated directly to Bill Clinton. That's not quite the whole story. Perot's exit coincides with the Democratic Convention, which has given Clinton a ton of momentum, and it's likely that even had Perot stayed in, he would have lost a number of pro-choice voters to Clinton. Even still, it seems that the Bush campaign's fears were very misplaced. Perot hadn't been cutting into Bush's votes. If anybody's, he was cutting into Clinton's. At least some political historians disagree with this, it should be noted. They argue that Perot, in fact, took votes from Clinton and Bush in more or less equal measure, if he took any at all. Whatever the case may be, this is now officially a two-horse race, but all the same, WAPO and ABC News pollsters get a little bit curious. In September, well over a month after Perot dropped out, they decide to slide his name into a poll alongside Bush and Clinton, and would you look at that? The guy who's no longer a candidate is still pulling 16%. After all, his name is still on the ballot, and he didn't technically quit because he didn't officially enter in the first place. Uh-oh. In September, Perot sets up a 1-800 number and invites people to call in to register their support. If his base has moved on from him, no hard feelings. But if they want him back, if they really, really want him back, he will jump right back into this race. Within the first hour alone, he gets 500,000 calls. You know, I think a key priority for Ross Perot during his candidacy has been to simply have a good time. He dropped his efforts once everything started being kind of a bummer, and now, after 2.5 months off, he gets to go straight to debate season, where he gets to put on a show, which is fun. Gone is his crack team of career campaign strategists whose ideas annoyed Perot to no end. They're replaced by his old buddy, Orson Swindle, who has perhaps the greatest crony name of all time, and who is not going to stand in Perot's way on anything. As the sort of quasi-official campaign chief, Swindle is steadfastly adhering to an atmosphere of unprofessionalism. Oh, you've been in politics before? You know what you're doing? Get the hell out of here. It's fine. It's gonna be fine. Politics isn't about winning, it's about having fun, having a good time, being yourself, and doing the things you enjoy. Debate season is finally here. After weeks of Bush ducking debates for so long it's as though he, the sitting president, is scared of Clinton. The two camps haggle endlessly about the specific format and rules of the debate. In the lead-up, they make sure to get plenty of reps in, running through mock debate after mock debate, fretting over their messaging, conceiving angles of attack. That shit is for nerds. Perot isn't doing any of it. Him and Orson Swindle are just gonna hang out instead. Again, It's gonna be okay. Don't worry about it. On October 11th in St. Louis, Bush, Clinton, and Perot meet up for the first of 3 debates. Perot nonchalantly strolls on stage, sizes up their neurotically manicured talking points, and beats their asses, with a strong plurality of likely voters feeling that he won decisively. He makes the crowd pop early and often, just a few minutes in, responding to his lack of experience as a politician.
Well, they've got a point. I don't have any experience in running up a $4 trillion debt.
A few minutes later, stealing moderator Jim Lehrer's line.
And people who are in charge,
Your time
is up.
Time is up.
Still within the first half hour, making a goof on his big ears that have delighted political cartoonists nationwide.
We've got to collect the taxes to do it. If there's a fairer way, I'm all ears.
Later on, he does something you never see in a debate. He's so confident he's won over the room that he holds for applause,
Pot's all broken to pieces after November the 3rd.
while the clock is still ticking on his allotted time. And then he just keeps going. This is something neither Bush nor Clinton would ever try. They don't have the juice. It goes on like this all night. Still, on a couple of occasions, Perot laments his inability to explore complex issues within this time-restrictive debate format.
And we have got to fix it. And that's about all I can say in a minute. We've got, I can't handle that in a minute, but I hope we can get back into it later.
No problem. That's what his TV show's for. Just a few days prior, he threw CBS a barrel of money to buy an entire 30-minute time slot and spent the entire show sitting at his desk going on and on and on about charts he drew himself. So, let me get this straight. A half-hour-long video where some dork just sits there and talks about charts the whole time? Who would ever watch that? Well, 16 million people would, it turns out. He even beats Quantum Leap in the ratings. It goes over so well that he buys a second time slot, this time on Friday night on ABC, which is right in the middle of the beloved TGIF lineup. Sorry, kids. And guess what? It's not even a new video. It's a rerun of the first one. Remember those tax hikes he was once too scared to talk about? Not anymore.
You folks are going to sit there and watch me talk about all the taxes I'm going to raise on you, and you're not going to like it?
Other tax increases. Here's one you don't like. Raise the gasoline tax.
And you're going to like it. As we enter debate number 2 in Richmond, Virginia, it's important to remember that Perot's opponents, Bush in particular, obsessed endlessly over the terms and formats and minutiae of every single debate. Perot doesn't care about any of that. He doesn't care about the format. He doesn't care about these optics. He doesn't care that they made the chairs really tall so that the 5'5" Ross Perot looks as tall standing up as they do sitting down. He can get off his goofs from sea level and even get a laugh out of the moderator.
And the dollar's gone through the floor. Now, whose fault is that? Not the Democrats, not the Republicans. Somewhere out there's an extraterrestrial that's doing this to us, I guess.
Now here he's talking about the national debt, which I cared even less about then than I do now. I watched this live. I had just turned 10 years old. I had no politics, so I was free to just like the guy, which I did. I think I just felt represented in watching this, both as a kid who liked funny jokes and a kid who was 4'6". Clinton wins this debate handily, thanks in part to everybody in America noticing when George H.W. Bush checked his watch during a question from the audience. But viewers named Perot the winner of the third and final debate. These performances go a long way toward galvanizing his support, which has about doubled to 19% since re-entering the race. Kind of incredibly, that mark remains perfectly in place throughout the remaining polls, and his final showing in the popular vote, 18.9%, mirrors those polls almost perfectly. A short little guy with big ears, who belonged to no party, who had zero experience in electoral politics and ignored and fired everyone around him who did no debate prep and pretty much winged it through 3 nationally televised debates, who promised to jack up Americans' taxes, who during peak campaign season just kinda wandered off and then wandered back in a couple months later, and who on multiple occasions said he didn't even really want to be president, wrestled away about 1/5 of the popular vote from political institutions thought to be invulnerable to such a challenge. The haters among us, of which there are many, will rightly point out that he didn't come very close to carrying any one state. He only placed as high as second in a couple of districts, and he therefore received 0 electoral votes, indicating that victory was never a serious possibility. In that case, I would argue that our definition of victory needs a little bit of work. Because in fact, By winning 18.9% of the popular vote, Ross Perot has done more than make history. He has built the future. Well, he's built a future, at least. You ever notice this box on your 1040 tax form asking you to donate a couple bucks to presidential campaign funds? Why not shelters or public schools or something? Why this, of all things? It's ridiculous. It feels like tipping your landlord. But if you do tick this box, the Federal Elections Commission funnels it to parties or candidates who accrued at least 5% of the popular vote in the most recent presidential election for use in the next general election. It comes in the form of matching funds. This program was first introduced in the 1970s, the idea being that it would mitigate the impact of large donors and prevent candidates from having to spend all their time fundraising. Perot, of course, nearly quadrupled that 5% threshold, which has secured him approximately $29 million in federal matching funds for the 1996 general election. Good news, everybody! The billionaire with libertarian leanings is receiving tens of millions of dollars in government handouts. The downside for Perot is that as a condition of accepting these funds, the billionaire will be prohibited from spending much of his own money. The upside is that it offers a future in which he can run somebody besides himself. And as we'll see pretty clearly in the run-up to the 96 election, they need somebody else in the worst way. Perot is an independent candidate whose movement doesn't count as an official political party. In August of '95, when he's asked about the possibility of forming a third party, he says it would take way too long, and he doesn't have that kind of time. In fact, he seems pretty over politics in general, saying he'd have to be crazy to jump back into the political arena. It's the opposite of the business world he comes from, he says, where everything is rational and adds up and makes sense. The political sphere is an alien world to him. He's seen it, he's lived in it, he hates it. It's a fundamentally irrational and stupid experience. The last thing on earth he is ever going to do is form a political party. So anyways, a month later he announces he's forming a political party. Along the way, he makes a couple of particularly dubious claims. The first is that he says he doesn't want to be about him. Ross, man, don't believe you. The second is that he declares this party will be weirdo-proof, that weirdos are not going to be able to find any purchase here. I am going to stick a pin in this one so we can all have a laugh about it down the road, because this is perhaps the least true thing that has ever been said. This brand new third party is to be called the Independence Party. Actually, wait, it's called the Reform Party. Okay, so it's going to be called either the Independence Party or the Reform Party. Wait. Actually, I think it's called the Independence Reform Party. Okay, so here's the deal. It's going to be called the Independence Party in most states and the Reform Party in states where the name Independence Party is taken. No, not even this is right. It's going to be, for real this time, the Reform Party nationally and in most states, and the Independence Party in a few other states. Got it? The first step of this party's million-step staircase to the presidency is simply this. What is your name? That's it. Just say your name. And they've already face-planted. That is what this is going to be like. In '96, Ross Perot starts shopping for a presidential candidate. He declares that he is looking for, quote, George Washington II, and insists over and over that he is not talking about himself, despite some pollsters bracketing him in a three-way race with Clinton and likely GOP nominee Bob Dole anyway. Entering June, he's been polling in the mid to high teens, indicating his base hasn't gone anywhere. Seems as though everyone but Ross Perot knows Ross Perot is running. Perot's camp was originally hoping for either Bill Bradley or Colin Powell, who's massively popular at the moment, but neither one is interested. Then they look at the second stringers, David Boren, Lowell Weicker, Tim Penny. No luck there either. As we speak, this race's incumbent candidate is cruising, and the challenger, Dole, has had the GOP nomination sewn up for months. Time is running out for the Reform Party. Finally, Perot finds his man. Former Colorado Governor Dick Lamb, none other than Governor Gloom himself. Lamb became famous for making fire and brimstone speeches warning that Americans were doomed unless they balanced the budget. In his most famous and infamous moment as governor, he stated that things like artificial hearts are too much trouble and that old people who need them should just die and get out of the way. It feels a little bit funny to place Lamb, a former Democrat, to the right of HW on social issues, but that's what I'm going to do. I'm not overly confident in my placement of him here because he offers an idiosyncratic collection of positions that only a Coloradoan can produce. He's a hardline fiscal conservative who fearmongers about both the dangers of multiculturalism and the threat of climate change. Those two don't usually go together, but if there's something to monger about, he's there. The man loves to mong. Although he never appears to have said so, I wonder whether Perot takes a beat here, looks back on how unpopular his own candidacy became once he had to start delivering bad news, and contemplates whether Governor Gloom is a guy he can count on to claim 5% of the vote in '96 and keep those matching funds rolling into the future. There's also the question of whether Perot, who didn't run on the reform ticket in '92 as it didn't exist yet, will be allowed to transfer those matching funds to anybody else. They might be for him and only him. No one really seems to know. So let's try to imagine Perot's horror when Lamb officially declares his intention to seek the reform nomination despite being broke as a joke, and then immediately presents a platform almost custom engineered to make everybody hate him. He wants to raise the retirement age, take a battle axe to Social Security, and yank away benefits from military veterans. I mean, at this rate, he's probably a week away from trying to make Jolly Ranchers a Schedule I drug. Ross has got to do something. And he does. Richard Lamb's 48-hour tenure as the presumptive reform nominee is over. It is yet another classic Ross Perot doubleback, only this time it does seem to be the right call. Because, as it turns out, Lamb would not have been able to access the matching funds after all. Perot effortlessly defeats the guy he himself recruited in the reform primary, made all the easier because he hoarded party mailing lists and wouldn't share them with Lamb. That's gonna be a running theme. Anyway, Perot takes the matching funds and runs a very low-effort campaign that aptly illustrates how badly the Reform Party needs him to pass the torch to somebody else. Earlier in the year, a college student once asked him how the Reform Party will be different from the two major parties. It was a perfect opportunity for him to make his pitch. Instead, he told her to get lost. Campaigning makes him cranky. He seems to hate it even more than he did in '92. So much so that he runs a front porch campaign, rarely emerging from his Dallas studio. In fact, they don't even call it a front porch campaign, they call it a cocoon campaign. Entering October, he's still only held one rally in public, and he appears hellbent on talking to voters exclusively through the TV screen, be it through debates or more of his 30-minute infomercials. Predictably, he fades in the polls and is nowhere near the 15% threshold required to actually participate in those debates. The networks, who are now preoccupied with trying to compete with Seinfeld rather than just Quantum Leap, will not sell him the primo time slots he wants. Perot, after running another campaign in which he refuses to do anything that is not fun, finishes with 8.4% of the popular vote in a race that everybody always knew was going to go to Bill Clinton. With this showing, Perot is eternally burnished as a political sideshow attraction, an irrelevant, desperate caricature. A loser. Once again, though, I take issue with that. For one, who else can earn 8 million American votes despite not traveling or speaking to crowds or even really trying? And while plenty of people did cackle at Perot's support melting to less than half of what it was in '92, the important thing is that he cleared that 5%. He brought the ball over the line. And this time, he did so as the official reform candidate. This means that next time, he actually will be able to transfer his matching funds to somebody else. In the years leading up to the 2000 presidential election, the specter of Perot will continue to loom over the Reform Party, with both people inside and outside expecting him to re-emerge as a candidate on any given day. But he won't. He's had enough. He is totally spent as a front-facing political force, and he knows it. Leaving us all to wonder where, exactly, his ceiling might have been had he not bailed a week removed from the peak of his powers in '92. You know, I think it's entirely possible that, weirdly enough, he actually did better as a result of having gone on vacation. There were surely plenty of other missteps and gaffes like his NAACP disaster that awaited him had he continued to campaign conventionally. In this way, he got to fast forward right past You People Perot to get to Debate Perot, which was the best version of himself. All the same, it does lead you to wonder what else might have gone on within these 10 weeks, for better or for worse. How things might have been different. Speaking of, do you remember those accusations of blackmail, the precipitating factor that finally pushed Perot out of the race? Well, Perot was tipped off by an old acquaintance of his, a guy named Scott Barnes. The two had bonded over the shared experience of falling for a widespread conspiracy theory alleging that there were still way more POWs being held in Vietnam than there actually were, and that the government was covering it up. In Barnes, Perot saw a compelling and trustworthy individual, a man who'd worked for the CIA and DEA, and a commando who'd infiltrated Laos to free American soldiers. In other words, a man who'd appealed to Perot's admiration of super-secret G.I. Joe guys and likely desire to be one himself. So, when Barnes confided in Perot that he himself had been hired by the Bush campaign to wiretap Perot's phones, Perot believed him. When Barnes said Bush's people were plotting to blackmail his daughter, Perot believed him, and when Barnes failed to produce any evidence, Perot defended him in the press. 5 years later, it's 1997. Scott Barnes has become a born-again Christian and has begun the process of accounting for his sins. It's during this process that he talks to the Dallas Morning News and confesses that he made all of it up. All of it. Barnes never worked for the DEA, he never worked for the CIA, he was never a commando, he never went on any POW rescue missions. There was absolutely no plot on behalf of the Bush campaign, nor anybody else, to tap Perot's phones or blackmail his daughter. The primary reason why Ross Perot abandoned one of the most shockingly successful campaigns in American history was 100% a complete lie. Barnes' stated motivation, confusingly, was that he believed President Bush hadn't done enough to free all those alleged POWs and was determined to take him down at all costs. Presumably, Barnes was hoping that Perot would go public with these accusations and use them as a bludgeon against Bush. Instead, Barnes' stories spooked Perot so badly that he just up and quit instead. And apparently unwilling to expose himself as a fraud, Barnes just let Perot keep on believing it. So much is to be learned of Ross Perot from this. Even at the time, Barnes' reputation as a compulsive liar and complete fraud was widespread within both the government and the media. He'd been peddling bullshit for so many years that he could no longer find anybody to believe any of it, until he found Perot. I know this is a tough argument to make at this moment, but Perot is an exceedingly smart man. He really is. He's a man of terrific intellect. It's so implausible that he would fall for a single source story like this, to the extent that you wonder whether this whole thing was just a piece of theater to give Ross an excuse to quit. Except Barnes so fully committed himself to these stories that he actually lied to Congress, which is of course a disastrous spot to put yourself in legally. This seems to have been how it went down. Ross really bought it. Ross Perot and I are very far apart politically. In the interest of transparency, I personally would not vote for him. The disinterest in even meeting with the NAACP in the first place tells me he lacks a true and complete understanding of the people who actually live here. But given who he was running against, given that he demonstrated that something else, anything else, was on the table, he had that, and he threw it away for the emptiest of reasons. It's hard for me to articulate my feelings here. I guess I'm just so hacked off. How did these lies get their hooks in a guy like this? It had to have been his tendency to give in to paranoia and conspiracy theories, whether it was the supposed 50 billion prisoners of war languishing in Southeast Asia, or his own campaign volunteers plotting his downfall. Or maybe even that weird story about the Black Panthers and North Vietnamese conspiring to murder him. Maybe somebody told him that's what went down and he just bought it. Who knows? Honestly, who knows? Admittedly, and amazingly, he was right to be paranoid. He was right to be suspicious of those in his own camp. He just didn't think it would come from someone so close to him. In light of all this, well, thank God he was never president. It would seem that anyone is capable of talking him into anything as long as he's promised that somebody's out to get him. So now, knowing all this, you might conclude that all these efforts were a complete waste of time, that the momentum generated by Jack Gargan has been squandered. that all the people who volunteered and campaigned and voted for Perot were hoodwinked, and that this movement is no movement at all. It's just a billionaire's funhouse subsidized by federal matching money. But the story of the Reform Party has barely begun. A new figure is finally about to emerge within this party, the type of figure Ross has been searching for. A political force worthy of being handed the torch. Who is capable of establishing the Reform Party as a legitimate political entity and who can do something Ross Perot never could? Win.